I don't know how to feel about this. Today we got some rather interesting Star Wars news involving Kathleen Kennedy, involving Temuera Morrison, the Book of Boba Fett, The Mandalorian, and future Star Wars projects and spin-offs. I'm going to talk about who said what and what that could potentially mean for the future of Star Wars, but it seems like a few strange things are happening behind the scenes, a bit of tension, but they're also planning different things, different Star Wars projects. But before we continue, please subscribe so that I can hopefully get to 1 million subs before Battlefront 3 releases. Thank you. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. So first I'm going to go over the Temuera Morrison Book of Boba Fett news, and then a bit later get into what Kathleen Kennedy has said and what that means for the future fate of Star Wars. So recently, Collider did an interview with Temuera Morrison asking him about the new movie he's in The Fire of War, which is a film about the New Zealand Wars. But in that interview, he was also asked about Star Wars and what's happening with the Book of Boba Fett Season 2. And his response, I think, is quite interesting and also quite telling. He said, "I'm sad too. Where is the Book of Boba Fett Season 2? Where the hell is Season 2? I know they're doing Ahsoka Season 2. I'm going, where's my Season 2? And apparently he even tried to call Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, Disney, Lucasfilm, whoever, just to ask if he can play Captain Rex and take the helmet off in Ahsoka Season 2. And I feel like Temuera Morrison has honestly been pushed off to the side a little bit recently with Star Wars. They're just not working on any projects he's involved in. But I find that kind of strange considering he played all of the clones and also Jango and Boba. And with Book of Boba Fett Season 1, I know a lot of people were left disappointed. I thought it was certainly weird. They had a lot of strange things in Season 1 that I know a lot of people didn't necessarily like about the series, including teenagers on bikes. The fact he even becomes the crime lord of Tatooine. The fact he's not necessarily the badass bounty hunter we all thought. And the fact parts of the show kind of felt like a fan film. And also the fact his show was kind of hijacked by The Mandalorian and became The Mandalorian Season 2.5. We had Grogu reuniting with Mando, which completely underwhelmed everything that had happened at the end of Mando Season 2, with Grogu and Mando being separated. But it's interesting that he actually spoke to Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau saying, I actually ran into them at Star Wars Celebration. You know what it's like when you go see guys. They got a look on their face and there's so much going on. And I go, hey, remember Boba Fett? So to me, this sounds like he hasn't really had any contact with them since the last project they worked on, or perhaps since even the last Star Wars Celebration. He said we had a big hug, and at the end of the day, I said, look, I'm not sure what's going on with you guys, but anyway, I had a great time. Thank you so much. But clearly, he wants to return as Boba Fett for a Book of Boba Season 2. And I just hope with Temuera Morrison, they don't waste his potential. I think he honestly brings so much fun to Star Wars and can be both super menacing and yet super hilarious at the same time. And if he's being genuine about not having received a call to play Captain Rex in Ahsoka Season 2, I'm kind of disappointed. I think he should be involved in that. And while he's still young enough and capable, he should be playing more clones on screen. He should be playing Boba Fett again. He did, however, tease in this interview that there could be more in store for Boba Fett in the future, because he said Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni didn't want to say too much. Put it that way. There were a few whispers of they didn't want to say too much, but they just left it at that. So I think he is involved in their plans sometime in the future, whether that's in Ahsoka Season 2 or Dave Filoni's film that brings together The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba, Ahsoka, Thrawn, everyone all together in the same film, which is likely still multiple years down the track. Probably won't release at this point until 2028 or 2029, especially considering I know they're filming Ahsoka Season 2 right now, and they'll likely need to get through that and release Season 2 before they even consider making the movie. Do they need to see if Ahsoka Season 2 is going to be successful to then go on to create the movie? Or is it a sure thing that Dave Filoni is getting his movie? I'm not so sure. But in this interview, he also made a funny analogy, saying, so it made me feel like, did you go to grandma's house and she had that preservative jar of peaches up on the shelf? That's what I think. I'm one of those peaches, and I've been put on the shelf. I've been preserved for a later date, and I'm going to be even tastier. So for now, he's saying he thinks that the writers and Star Wars show creators are just waiting to use him again at some point in the future. He also said, geez, I needed to be in that Andor. What a show, Andor. Like they were ever going to put Boba Fett in Andor or a clone. That would have been funny. I could see him doing a cameo in Andor, but it would just feel so out of context because I feel like they're completely opposite ends of Star Wars. But I like the idea that he even thought about that. Apparently, he ended the interview by saying, "I'm going to hang out in my preservative jar and wait to be reopened." So for now, Boba Fett is chilling on the shelf. However, should they even make a Book of Boba Season 2? I feel like if they were to do so, the only reason for doing so would be to make up for some of the mistakes or errors of Season 1. Some of the things people didn't necessarily like about the show. It definitely had highlights. I like that he went back to blow up the Sarlacc pit.
Fire in the hole!
I liked the way he escaped the Sarlacc. I honestly didn't even mind him hanging out with all the Tuskens and learning their ways and kind of evolving in that way. It was kind of everything that happened after that that felt, I don't know, a bit disjointed. Boba Fett in the original trilogy was so interesting because there was so much mystery around the character. There was so much mystique about him. He just stood in the background looking cool, and that's what he's best at. He's best at being intimidating from a distance. And I think that's maybe where Book of Boba fell apart a little bit. It was too zany, too comical and strange at times, and just kind of felt a bit cheap.
I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
Technically, it is kind of a COVID show, I guess, so maybe we can give it that. I know a lot of people felt the same about the Obi-Wan series. I don't know though, with the right show creators and the right story, I feel like they could definitely do a season 2. But even if they don't, Temuera Morrison, bring him back as a clone while he's still young enough. He's so good in the prequels. He's so good as Jango Fett. He's still that character. Let him play the clone. Even the small moments, like the moment in Obi-Wan where there's that clone line on the side of the street.
Help a veteran get a warm meal.
I love that because it feels so real. It feels so authentic to what the original clones were supposed to be. And I honestly think there's a place for Captain Rex in Ahsoka Season 2 or in a future Star Wars project, played by Temuera Morrison.
Here's my new t-shirt. I forgot to put that on. Look. Oh. We're starting up a new band called Boba Fett. We're practicing Billy Idol songs today. Oh my God.
Now, the other news, Kathleen Kennedy has recently hinted at some future Star Wars projects and also revealed what's happening with Star Wars Starfighter, the Sean Levy directed Star Wars movie.
Well, what excites me now is, certainly with the success of Andor, which has really been a 10-year journey, beginning with Rogue One and then building off of that in the series that Tony Gilroy created, has really expanded genres that we can look at and feel that we can tell stories in a galaxy far, far away with many, many different genres. And Jon Favreau, working with Mandalorian, is very different from what Tony was doing with Andor, and that explores the genre of Westerns. And that's what George did. He was constantly looking at film and the way stories build off of genre. And I really think that now we're in a position where it broadens the possibilities of stories and filmmakers that we can bring in to tell stories that mean something to them. It doesn't necessarily have to connect to every little thing that's been done in Star Wars. Yeah. It can actually be a standalone story, like an Andor, like a Rogue One, that then builds into many, many more stories.
Now, what's interesting about this is that I feel like she contradicts herself a little bit in the way she says this, because she talks about bringing in different filmmakers who are allowed to tell stories outside of what Star Wars has always been and what Star Wars currently exists, and uses Andor as a reference for this. But Andor is incredibly connected to the Skywalker saga, to A New Hope, to Rogue One, and I understand that it's a standalone story outside of this, but it's still highly connected. But the way she mentions being able to use these other stories to then build into many, many more stories, I think is kind of interesting, especially considering what we've just had with Andor, which is technically a spin-off / prequel to Rogue One. But does this mean Lucasfilm are now also considering doing spin-offs to Andor, considering its success? However, the problem here is if we look at things financially, I'm pretty sure so far Book of Boba has made more money than Andor. Andor was more expensive to produce, had more episodes, and I believe is still on the lower end of minutes watched. The data isn't entirely complete just yet, and it gets a bit muddled with the amount of time spent watching these episodes, especially because they release 3 at a time, and I haven't seen any conclusive evidence that Andor isn't more successful and isn't being viewed more than other Star Wars series. We know Mandalorian is still at the top, still the most popular, successful Star Wars series ever made. And Andor, once again, I think is going to be one of those sleeper hits that slowly grows over time and continues to be watched for many years to come. But the way she describes this, the fact they're still looking at bringing in many more filmmakers to evolve Star Wars and make different kinds of Star Wars projects based on the themes and genres that they work in, I think is good news. I think we're going to see more different styles of Star Wars. I think they still need to do some kind of Star Wars horror project. But interesting that Disney's roadmap forward still is a bit unclear in the streaming space, because as far as we know so far, and especially based on what Tony Gilroy said a few weeks ago, streaming is kind of dying for Disney. We've known for a while that Disney Plus is kind of struggling and doesn't have that same boost The Mandalorian gave it. But Tony Gilroy also talked about a few weeks ago how if they were making Andor now, if they had to start now, they don't think they'd be able to get the budget for it and would not be able to make the same show that they did, which is disappointing to hear. Partly also because of the disappointment of series like the Book of Boba Fett Season 1, like the Obi-Wan series, like The Acolyte, how they weren't necessarily well received. Skeleton Crew as well, even though I think it's a decent show, I don't think found a large audience. And for now, it seems like Disney are moving back to theaters. They're doing the big movies, which she also talks about here. Star Wars Starfighter, she says, is beginning filming in September. She said they're currently still going through the casting phases. Ryan Gosling obviously playing the lead, and that movie is currently scheduled to release in May 2027. So they have time.
So that begins shooting in September, which is one of the reasons I'm here.
Yeah.
And we're very excited about that with Ryan Gosling. And we're just putting together the cast. It's going to be pretty great.
But also, what's interesting, this interview and these clips that I'm showing you are actually taken from a screening of the original print of Star Wars from 1977. She was giving a talk to introduce the original print of Star Wars, and I think so many people are wondering, why have they not released this to the public? I think so many people would be interested in the original version of Star Wars, the unaltered version. I'm sure if they put the original print of Star Wars on Disney Plus, so many people would watch it. So many people would be curious to have the cinema experience they had way back in the movies in 1977, to see what the original version was like. Even if it is rough around the edges, why not re-release it? Why not just show it to us? I don't know whose decision that is, whether that's something George Lucas still somehow controls, but I would be so curious to see the original Star Wars because I've never seen it. Also, recent in Star Wars news, Mark Hamill was on the Today Show addressing the rumor that he quit Star Wars, and he talked about just clarifying that that's not what he ever intended to say or imply. He just thinks that his role with Star Wars is done, that he delivered the Luke Skywalker that he did, and now it's time for them to tell new stories, and that he loves what they're doing, that he loves Rogue One, that he loves seeing the new Star Wars shows, The Mandalorian, Andor, and then he thinks Star Wars should continue to evolve beyond the Skywalker saga. My favorite thing about his interview that he did here, though, is that he talked about a movie with all of the Star Wars Force Ghosts, and that's what he'd want to see made.
I'd like to see a movie set all in the Force Ghost realm. You know, I could have conversation with Alec Guinness and all of
now you're giving him ideas.
from your lips to God's ear.
There it is, guys. What do you make of the recent Star Wars news? Are you excited? Do you think Temuera Morrison should return? Do you think they should give him a Book of Boba Fett Season 2? For more Star Wars, watch this video here. Also, come follow me on Instagram, Twitter, join my Discord and TikTok. And thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon. Always remember,
stay bombastic.